Good morning. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. It's a great honor for me, and I actually really wish I was there with you. Now, before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that my presentation today was produced on the traditional lands of the Darug and Gundungurra people, where I live west of Sydney in the Blue Mountains in Australia. And I want to pay my respect to their elders past, present, and future. Now, today I'm going to be reflecting upon the contextual factors outlined in my abstract, with particular reference to wicked problems. But I'll also be talking about the criticality of challenging our assumptions as designers and researchers. And I'm going to show two recent illustrative examples of what I call unlearning design, that represent methods of collaboration and participation that I will argue can assist designers to co-create more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive futures. We find ourselves faced with many emergent, simultaneous, complex design challenges, wicked problems. The design theorist Richard Buchanan described wicked problems as a class of social system problems which are ill-formulated, where information is confusing, where there are many clients and decision makers with conflicting values, and where the ramifications in the whole system are thoroughly confusing. So what to do? It's crucial, I argue, that designers can collaborate inclusively across culture and discipline to work on addressing the multitude of radical transformations underway. However, we aren't good at this. Our design, research, and education systems are not equipped to help solve the increasing global problems that humans face in our complex, hyper-connected world. We generally don't teach designers this, and mostly design education focuses on relatively simple problems. Rapid urbanization exemplifies this design challenge. How do we ensure future cities are more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive? It's this question that I'm most interested in at the moment, and it's the most relevant problem context to my own research. Professor David Sanderson of University of New South Wales asks, how do we create cities that do not continue to deplete resources, increase temperatures, and contribute to chronic poverty? In recent fire seasons here in Australia, we've had unprecedented wildfires in our urban areas that generate their own weather systems. We have large heat sinks in the suburbs of our coastal cities. Moreover, the relationship between urbanization and climate, the interrelational aspect of our global crisis, brings us even more complexity. I know, for example, that in my own university there are deep concerns in our design faculty about where artificial intelligence is taking us. How can we design with it and use it for benefit rather than detriment? Can we be collaborators, or are there much more troubling challenges ahead? As our situation deteriorates, all this feeds into the ongoing threat of global conflict, and it seems well beyond the remit of designers. So what can we do? What is clear, regardless of your interpretation of all this, is the concept that we're all fundamentally interconnected. But as designers, we don't necessarily work as if we are. Sure, there are global design teams, but what are they working on? Many of the challenges we face as humans everywhere cannot be solved by designing more products, more services, or more related experiences, however human-centered they might be. There are now calls that we need to evolve beyond human-centered design towards a more life-centered or earth-centered approach. A more than human ethos for design. And that's a big topic in itself. Within our practice, the importance of acknowledging, understanding, and working within and fostering design ecologies, diverse ecosystems of design, has never been more crucial. This view recognizes Ezio Manzini's notion that actually everyone is a designer, as expressed even in the title of his book, Design When Everybody Designs. And it permits us the opportunity to create shared vision for the future by seeing the role of design and designers in new, more inclusive ways. The design theorist and emeritus professor, John Wood, has talked about design ecosystems as being about encouraging diversities of diversity and the need for designers to seek out and unlock the inherent synergies that exist in our many urban, social, cultural, disciplinary, and environmental relationships to each other and the planet. So I want to introduce some concepts relevant to what I'm talking about and what I'm going to discuss. Firstly, meta-design. This has been interpreted in many ways by theorists, artists, and designers. It's a complex concept worth delving into. In my research, it's defined as being about the recognition that design is a collaborative social process involved with, as I've said, many diverse connections. And I've been very influenced by the definition of meta-design on screen here from John Wood. What stands out to me is Wood's assertion that meta-design implies that we need a more joined-up approach, that we need to engage in rethinking the way that designers are taught, practice, and organize themselves. And it also entails redesigning design itself. The idea that we exist in a pluriverse questions the alleged universality of Euro-America-centric modernity. Pluriversal design, therefore, is representative of an approach to design where, in the words of the Colombian-American anthropologist Arturo Escobar, the aim is to co-create a world where many worlds fit. I think we can agree that design is ubiquitous in modern life. It's everywhere. And one key characteristic of how we most generally understand design, at least in Eurocentric understandings of design like the way I was educated as a designer here in Australia, is that it's universally applicable. But is this actually the case? Escobar states that the notion of a one world signals the predominant universalizing idea in the West that we all live within a single world, made up of one underlying reality, one nature, and many cultures. In his book, Designs for the Pluriverse, Escobar asserts this is an imperialistic notion that presupposes the West's ability to give itself the right to be the world, and to subject all other worlds to its rules, to diminish them to secondary status or non-existence. But clearly, Western understandings of design are not universal. We need more voices and diverse understandings of the world and the ecosystems we all exist in, if we hope to design shared futures that are more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive. But are designers good at including more diverse voices, even in co-design or participatory design and research? Well, some research suggests not, citing a lack of empathy for participants in their language, attitudes, and behaviors. Studies by Yuan and Dong in 2014 showed that designers dominated co-design processes and co-designing with end users wasn't naturally adopted. Gott and Wender and their colleagues in 2022 asked, well, what kind of participation leads to resilience? And how do we build such resilience in socially sustainable ways? I'm encouraging you today to consider going forward and developing methods where the participants in your research both frame and lead the process within a collaborative space established through negotiation with stakeholders in a particular problem context. Now, in many ways, this is all a communication problem, or creates communication problems. Making assumptions about our collaborators, end users, and participants in our research and in our research designs is a significant communication challenge that we all face. Kishore Mahbubani's observation here highlights the challenge of making assumptions in a way that corresponds with Escobar's notion of a pluriverse. Making assumptions limits us and our capacity to understand a given situation. What assumptions do we make when we're entering a design collaboration, designing research, or instigating co-design projects, no matter the cultural context? How do our assumptions influence our methods and the success of a collaboration? How do our methods shape the way we design the world and the way our world designs us? This results in issues of trust. No one collaborates with people they don't trust for very long. So I want to talk about 2 case studies where I've been testing these ideas. As noted, rapid urbanization is the context for my design research, and specifically, I'm researching participatory placemaking for more livable cities. Placemaking frames cities as ecosystems, as noted by Jane Jacobs in 1961, prioritizing people over cars, shopping centers, efficiency, and aesthetics by focusing on designing inviting public spaces and livable precincts. Testing how design can make placemaking, particularly post-pandemic placemaking, more participatory is significant because investigating how design can help address complex livability and placemaking challenges will give government and urban planners customizable tools for understanding citizen preferences and priorities about specific placemaking problems. Now, this project, MetaPlace, is a collaborative project involving creative industry, academic and government partners from China and Australia, and it uses the city of Chongqing as a case study. MetaPlace research began in Sydney with the testing of a reproducible approach for identifying how to program urban screens so that they involve the public in generating useful planning and placemaking data for a specific physical and socio-cultural environment. This involved design and methods for facilitating citizen-generated content, participatory voting, and public large-scale data visualization of crowdsourced content. And this tests the use of urban screens situated in public space as platforms for diagnosing the needs of the city and its citizens. And as Chongqing is a city where the presence of urban media at all scales, from the skyscraper to the phone, is omnipresent, it's an ideal case study for exploring the potential of this kind of diagnostic participatory method for digital placemaking. So I adapted the initial prototype used in Sydney to a bilingual interface and introduced it as a provocation at a series of workshops held at the Dimensions Art Centre in Chongqing. I initially approached the planning for the workshop by adapting Knapp's Google Design Sprint model for what I thought was going to be a 2-day experimental hackathon designed to engage local urban media stakeholders, or UMS, in affinity mapping and rapid paper prototyping. And we invited a very diverse group of urban media stakeholders to represent the ecosystem of the urban screen industry. Urban planners, artists and cultural workers, architects, academics, designers and design managers, creative technologists, an anthropologist, government representatives, and students. And these methods were underpinned by a theoretical framework based in meta-design and Fisher and Giacardi's Manifesto for End-User Development that you can see here. Now, as visualized here, the methodology features stages of co-design, testing, and evaluation, informed by participant feedback, which leads to reflexive design iterations that are tested with participants and then further evaluated. Now, here is where I want to highlight the dangers of making assumptions about participants and the usefulness of research methods we design to gather this type of data. My co-researchers expressed concerns about my approach to the workshops. They felt the open-ended hackathon framework would not be effective with a diverse local stakeholder group. And as we discussed this, it became clearer that even if the workshop was experimental, it still needed to accommodate local, social, and cultural processes and expectations, which would all play into the amount of commitment participants could or would invest. So Google's design sprint model was actually acknowledged as an overtly Western approach, leading to a collaborative renegotiation of the workshop plan. Using a much more targeted framework of prompting questions and a mode that better reflected local expectations and better accommodated the complex social and professional relational processes at play. Now, during the workshop process, many assumptions about design and design research were challenged in this space, revealing the limitations of Eurocentric, Western understandings about the use and context of data in this cultural context, and about what design and co-design is, what it's for, and how it's conducted. Now, as published in the China City Planning Review in 2022 and IASDR in Hong Kong in 2021, the outcomes of the research to date are not as we anticipated in this visualization when we started in 2019. Participants felt that a more effective approach for the research would be to focus on using popular applications on mobile phones, such as WeChat. And this has informed the development of the MetaPlace app. Now, it retains all the functionality to visualize the aggregated data at any urban scale, but the interface itself is at the scale of the mobile phone screen, at the scale of the individual users, less public and more discreet. Now, you can follow the QR code to see and respond to an instance of a recent iteration of the MetaPlace app. Now, in publishing the research findings, we used what we call a multi-vocal approach, including all the research partners, to avoid the universalizing tendencies of scholarly writing about design. And this helped us rethink our compliance with the rigid expectations of institutional structures and traditions that, as Schultz and others have noted in 2018, dominate and limit design practices, learning about design, and researching through design. It's at the points of human interaction and communication, the original schematics depiction of straightforward, open-ended cooperation fails, because it renders invisible critical factors including cultural dynamics, social and professional hierarchies, traditional ways of living, and power relations that determine or otherwise shape interactions between participants and participants and researchers. So I'm influenced here by Gatton Ingold's 2013 understanding of participatory processes as anthropology by means of design, where our role as co-creator and researcher is underpinned by reflexive, mindful participation within the co-creation, not as the ethnographic researcher outside the process, recording and observing what happens. This augmented model better reflects the actual process we experienced. The second case study is informed by the earlier design research in Chongqing. During 2021, I began experimenting in post-COVID Sydney with digital media in urban placemaking contexts. This project involves an interdisciplinary team of design and media artists, researchers, academic experts in education and disability, an industry partner working with public digital media, and members of Sydney's neurodivergent community. Now, this study is focused on collaboratively empowering people who identify as neurodivergent, those with autism, ADHD, social anxiety, and other associated conditions. And it does this while testing how digital media in public spaces can contribute to placemaking by giving voice to disadvantaged communities and increasing public awareness and engagement with neurodivergence. In a series of collaborative participant-led workshops, neurodivergent stakeholders framed their individual issues and problems and created audio-visual content, digital storytelling, visual information, and digital artworks. And these are being deployed on our industry partner SM Project's digital media platform Storybox in cultural programming to help activate post-COVID-19 public spaces at sites around Sydney during 2023-2024. The research focuses on inclusivity to build the resilience and well-being of neurodivergent communities who don't have a public platform to express their experiences and life stories, thereby remaining invisible and or misunderstood in the community. This project further tests design co-creation and participation models for inclusive design that establish, negotiate, and communicate value for a range of community-led digital urban interventions, including this case study with neurodiverse participants, providing evaluative mechanisms, enabling creative industry practitioners in the digital public media industry or the ecology of that industry to demonstrate public and stakeholder impact and engagement, in other words, the business case. And it also signals novel forms of digital participatory and community placemaking that can build resilience, inclusion, and confidence in diverse urban contexts. And the outputs of the project will include participant and audience survey data, co-designed digital public media content, further iteration of the inclusive pluriversal methodology and tools for evaluating and communicating impact, some co-authored academic publications, and we're also aiming to attract further funding from the Australian Research Council. So in conclusion, my theoretical proposition is that there is an urgent need for designers and design researchers to work on advancing more diverse, participatory and inclusive modes of design where world making, or in this case, city making and place making, is a way to talk about engaging many worlds to address the onslaught of wicked problems we continue to face. This requires being open to unfamiliar ways of working, challenging our assumptions about ourselves, each other, design, end users, participants and collaborators, and letting go of the universalizing tendencies of Western-style design thinking and relearning how we can design together, what design means, what it does, and how it's conducted. And my hope is that developing these design methods and modes of research and practice further will enable designers to foster more diverse design ecologies whose synergies will permit the development of globally sustainable, resilient, and inclusive futures. Thank you for your attention.